A major threat from President Trump on the heels of one of the most critical moments for the president so far at the G20 Summit. In the middle of a trade war with China, the president is threatening to slap China with more than $260 billion in additional tariffs. He also said this week he wouldn't rule out additional tariffs that would hit things as popular as iPhones. Ouch. This comes as President Trump is set to meet with Xi Jinping on Saturday, the two leaders looking to see if they can strike a trade deal. With me now, CNN senior economics analyst and former Trump economic advisor Stephen Moore, also the author of this new book, Trumponomics. Thank you for being with us. Good morning.
Hi, Poppy.
So as you know, some longtime U.S.-China relations experts say not since President Nixon's official visit to China in 1972 has a meeting between the two countries been so critical. Of course, Nixon called that the week that changed the world. Is that how important this meeting is?
Well, I think it's pretty critical. I think you really nailed it. This is one of the most important opening negotiations with China that we've had in probably 30 or 40 years. When I talk to my White House sources, Poppy, what they're saying is they're not too confident that we're going to get a deal, but they may get a deal to get a deal. And that would, I think, calm some of these financial markets. I mean, I think one of the reasons we've seen this roller coaster ride on stocks that you all have been reporting at CNN for the last several months is precisely because everybody has their eye on how these negotiations are going. Look, I happen to think Trump has a very strong case. We're an abusive relationship with China. They do cheat, they do steal, and we can't go on with that. We'll see whether or not China makes any kind of concessions or not.
Well, they've made a bunch, as you know, that long list of over 150 demands that came back to the White House. But the president said, look, there's a few sticking points on there, and we're not going to budge until they budge on those. You said on November 16th, quote, we're in a cold war with China right now. It's very clear how you feel about China at this point. What does President Trump need to say to President Xi this weekend?
By the way, that statement, I think that's the way Donald Trump views China right now, that we're in an adversarial position with China, that they have not acted like a friend, but more as an enemy of the United States in terms of a lot of their trade practices. There's nothing more that Donald Trump would like to do than get this thing resolved in a way that helps the United States and creates what he calls a level playing field. One of the things that I've heard from some of my White House sources who are over there now in Argentina is they worry that China may on paper agree to things, but it is sort of like the old Soviet Union. You've got to have the Reagan principle of trust but verify. They're worried that China will agree to things on paper but not follow through with it. So this is still, I think, a very early stage in these important negotiations.
Right. Let me just ask you, Stephen, though, before you go, on human rights. The administration has said they will bring up human rights when the president meets with President Xi this weekend. You've got not only the human rights abuses against 1 million Muslim, Uyghurs in the country, you also now have two young Americans, age 19 and 27, who have not been allowed to leave China since June. And that's not a fact that I think a lot of American people know, but that should be very important to the president. Are you at all concerned that, as he has done with Saudi Arabia, President Trump will be willing to place business interests of the United States and getting a trade deal with China ahead of all else, ahead of human rights issues?
Well, look, I think they're all important, no question about it. I can't speak for the president on, those human rights, negotiations, but you're exactly right. There are horrible human rights violations. They've moved in the wrong direction on human rights over the last 10 years in Beijing. But in terms of the big economic picture, which is what I focus on, Poppy, getting a deal with China, if we can get this done, the American economy and the global economy will explode. I mean, what's at stake here is really huge for the economy, not just for the next couple of years, but potentially for decades. And I would love to see an arrangement where both countries agree to lower tariffs. Free trade is good for the world, but China is not. I like what Trump has basically been saying for the last couple of years. It's just Trump says, I didn't start this trade war with China. They started this with us, 10 years ago when we finally have a president who's calling them out on it.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like kids, in kindergarten. It doesn't really matter who started it, who's going to stop it. I guess we'll see. Stephen Moore, thank you.
Thank you, Poppy.
The New York Attorney General is investigating a huge data breach.